You might have heard the talk going around that India's big new data privacy law, the DPDPA, has this massive blind spot, a loophole so huge you could make all your rights just disappear. But here's the wild part. The key to unlocking this giant loophole is supposedly a simple piece of paper. Could that really be true? Well, that's what we're here to investigate.
Yeah, that's the core question, isn't it? Could something as totally normal as every day as a paper form you fill out at a clinic or a bank, could that really just sidestep one of the most important new laws in the country? It sounds, I don't know, almost too simple to be legit, and that's exactly why we've got to break it all down.
Okay, let's paint a picture here so this isn't just some abstract legal theory. Imagine this. You go to a clinic. You write down all your personal health information on a paper form. Now, the clinic turns around and sells a whole box of these forms to some insurance startup. That startup then scans every single one, turning your physical handwriting into digital data. The big question is, who's on the hook for protecting that digital copy now? According to some critics, the answer is, well, nobody.
And that right there, that's the heart of the whole accusation. The argument is that the DPDPA has this fundamental, dangerous flaw, a blind spot, that lets this exact scenario play out, leaving your newly digitized data in a weird legal limbo. Now, to make this argument sound super official, critics came up with this really complicated name for it. Get ready for this. The Secondary Digitized Data Derivative Fiduciary. Yeah, I know, it's a mouthful. But basically, it's just a fancy label for the insurance company in our story, the one that gets your paper data and scans it. The whole claim hinges on this idea that this is some new kind of company that the law just doesn't account for.
Okay, and this is where it gets genuinely scary. The argument is that because this so-called secondary fiduciary didn't get the data digitally from you directly, they can just say, hey, we don't have any legal duty to you. And what does that mean for you? It means your right to fix your info or even ask for it to be deleted could just evaporate. That is a massive, massive claim.
All right, so we've heard the accusation. It sounds pretty bad, right? But now it's time to be good detectives and look at the primary evidence. Let's actually open up the law book and see what the Digital Personal Data Protection Act itself has to say.
And wow, when you put them side by side, the difference is just night and day. The claim is that if a second company digitizes your data, it's out of scope. But the law? The law literally says the exact opposite. It specifically says it applies when data is collected on paper and then digitized.
And here you have it. This is the smoking gun, right from Section 3A.2 of the DPDPA. I mean, it says it as clearly as possible. The Act applies to data collected in non-digital form and digitized subsequently. This line directly, explicitly covers the exact scenario that critics are calling a loophole. There's really no wiggle room here. But wait, it gets even better. Let's go a layer deeper. There's this legal principle from India's older IT Act from way back in 2000. It's called the ab initio principle. Fancy term, but it just means from the beginning. So what this means is, if that first clinic collects your paper form knowing it's going to be digitized later, the law treats it as digital data from the very second you hand it over. The protection kicks in right from the start.
All right, so that's one part of the argument down. Let's move on to the second big claim that's propping up this blind spot theory. The critics say the DPDPA fails something called a proportionality test, which they claim comes from that huge Supreme Court judgment, the Putaswamy case, that made privacy a fundamental right. But is that what the judgment actually said?
So here's how their argument goes, more or less. Step 1. The Supreme Court created this doctrine of proportionality. Step 2. Since the DPDPA only focuses on digital data and not all data everywhere, it fails this test. Step 3. Therefore, the law has supposedly ignored a direct order from the highest court in the land. It sounds like a pretty serious charge, but it all hangs on how you interpret that judgment. But let's look at what the Putaswamy judgment actually did. Yes, it was absolutely historic. It declared privacy a fundamental right. But, and this is a huge but, it did not lay out a blueprint for one single all-powerful law. In fact, what it really did was sound the alarm about the unique, high-stakes risks of the new digital age. So trying to apply this idea of proportionality to the scope of what a law should cover, that's just a complete misreading of what the court was trying to do.
Okay, so we've looked at the evidence, we've gone through the arguments, it's time to deliver the verdict. Is there really a blind spot? Is there this severance of data provenance where all the protections just get lost? And while we're at it, what are the correct legal terms we should be using for these companies?
First things first, let's get the terminology right. You remember that ridiculously long name? The Secondary Digitized Data Derivative Fiduciary? Well, legally, that's just a joint data fiduciary. And that scary outsourcing loophole? Nope, that's just a standard data processor. See? These are already existing legal categories, and they are absolutely covered by the law.
And this is the most important takeaway. The chain of responsibility is never, ever broken. That first clinic that took your form, they are still responsible. And when they hand your data over to the insurance company, that company either becomes a joint fiduciary or a data processor. And guess what? They are also 100% legally bound by the DPDPA. The protections follow the data, no matter where it goes.
So all of this brings us to a pretty clear conclusion. When you actually read the DPDPA and look at the legal history, the whole framework holds up pretty strong against this specific criticism. This so-called blind spot, it really seems to be more of a misreading of the law than an actual loophole in it. So let's just do a super quick recap of how we busted this myth. Number 1, the DPDPA's own text explicitly says it covers paper data that gets digitized. Number 2, the whole ab initio idea adds another layer of protection from the very start. Number 3, the big argument about proportionality is based on a misinterpretation of that landmark Supreme Court case. And finally, number 4, the companies involved aren't some new legal monster, they're just joint fiduciaries or data processors, and they are fully covered. So yeah, myth, pretty much busted.
Look, just because this particular blind spot seems to be a myth, that doesn't mean the DPDPA is perfect or that there aren't challenges ahead. Of course there are. The real work of actually implementing and enforcing this law, well, that's just getting started. All we've done today is clear away some of the noise so we can focus on the real important conversations to come. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.